The night was cold, the kind that seeped through layers of clothing and clung to the skin. Underneath a dim street lamp, a small family huddled together on a frayed blanket spread across the hard pavement of a bustling Los Angeles street. The city roared with life around them. Honking cars, laughter spilling out of fancy restaurants, and the occasional wail of a police siren. But for this family, it felt like they existed in a different world altogether. Their son, Ben, barely 7 years old, clung tightly to his mother's arm. His wide brown eyes darted around, scanning for threats, though there was little he could do to protect his family. His father, Mark, sat beside them, his shoulders slumped in defeat. A man who once stood tall and proud now looked weathered, worn down by endless days of rejection and uncertainty. His wife, Sarah, held onto a flicker of hope that seemed more fragile with every passing day. Their story was not unlike countless others. Mark had lost his job 2 years ago when the factory where he worked shut down. At first, they managed with Sarah's part-time cleaning job, but when rents in the city skyrocketed, they couldn't keep up. Eviction came swiftly, and now, for the past 8 months, they had called the streets home. Ben, too young to understand the intricacies of economic collapse, only knew that he missed his bed, his toys, and his warm meals. Tonight, a biting wind swept through the streets, and Sarah pulled her thin coat tighter around her son. Mark had tried to secure shelter earlier in the day, but every place was either full or required paperwork they no longer had. As the family settled in for another sleepless night, a sleek black Tesla rolled down the street, its headlights slicing through the gloom. The car's presence was an oddity in this part of town, where luxury vehicles were as rare as hope itself. The driver, a man in his early 50s with a sharp, intelligent gaze and a kind smile, spotted the family huddled together. Elon Musk wasn't supposed to be here. His schedule was packed, his life a whirlwind of meetings, innovations, and public appearances. But tonight, he had decided to take the long way home, a detour from his usual route, wanting a moment to think away from the noise of his responsibilities. As the car approached the family, Elon slowed down, his eyes drawn to the little boy clutching his mother's arm. There was something about the scene that struck him deeply, a quiet pain that seemed to resonate with his own memories of struggle and uncertainty. He remembered his own hardships, the days when he had risked everything to chase impossible dreams, and how close he had come to losing it all. The sight of the family stirred something in him, a determination to help in a way that went beyond charity. He didn't believe in temporary fixes. He believed in solutions that lasted. Elon parked his car a short distance away and stepped out, his breath visible in the cold night air. Dressed in a simple jacket and jeans, he looked more like a regular guy than the billionaire entrepreneur who had revolutionized industries. As he approached, the family tensed. Encounters with strangers could mean anything, and they had learned to be wary. "Hi there," Elon said, his voice gentle. "I don't mean to startle you. I just noticed you and thought maybe I could help." Mark instinctively moved in front of Sarah and Ben, shielding them as best he could. "We don't want any trouble," he said, his voice hoarse. "No trouble at all," Elon replied, holding his hands up in reassurance. "I just want to talk. Maybe there's something I can do to help." Sarah studied the man carefully. There was sincerity in his eyes, a kindness that felt genuine. "We don't need money," she said softly. "We just need a chance." Elon nodded, understanding the weight behind her words. He crouched down to Ben's level, meeting the boy's curious gaze. "What's your name, buddy?" "Ben," the boy said quietly, clutching a stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. "Well, Ben, I think you're pretty brave. It's not easy being out here." Elon's voice was warm, putting the boy at ease. "How about I take you and your family somewhere warm tonight? We'll figure out the rest together." Mark hesitated. Offers like this often came with strings attached. But something about this man felt different. Maybe it was the way he spoke, calm and assured. Or maybe it was the fact that he had stopped it all, something so few others had done. After a moment, Mark gave a small nod. "All right," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Elon smiled and led them to his car. Ben's eyes widened as he climbed into the sleek interior, the soft leather seats a stark contrast to the hard pavement he was used to. Sarah held his hand tightly, still unsure if this was too good to be true, but for the first time in months, she allowed herself to hope. As the car glided through the city streets, Elon listened intently as Mark and Sarah shared their story. He didn't interrupt, didn't judge. He just listened, his mind already racing with ideas. By the time they reached the small boutique hotel Elon had in mind, he had made a decision. This wasn't going to be a one-time gesture. He was going to change their lives, not with charity but with opportunity. As the family settled into their room, the warmth and safety of the space brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Ben jumped onto the bed, giggling for the first time in what felt like forever. Mark sat down heavily in a chair, his hands trembling as the weight of their struggles began to lift, if only slightly. Elon watched them quietly, a faint smile on his lips. This was just the beginning. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains of the hotel room, waking Sarah before the alarm clock she hadn't set. For a moment, she lay there, disoriented. The mattress beneath her back was soft, and the faint scent of clean linen surrounded her. It was a far cry from the cold, unforgiving streets. Mark sat in a chair by the window, staring out at the bustling city below, his face a mixture of disbelief and cautious optimism. Ben was curled up under the blankets, still fast asleep, a tiny smile on his lips. Just as Sarah was beginning to process the events of the previous night, there was a knock on the door. She tensed instinctively, but Mark stood and answered it. To their surprise, Elon Musk stood there, holding a tray of coffees and pastries. "Good morning," he said with a smile. "I thought you might want breakfast." Elon's casual kindness unsettled Sarah. It wasn't that she doubted his intentions, but after years of being overlooked or judged, she found it hard to believe someone like him would go out of his way to help. "You didn't have to do this," she said softly, taking the tray from him. "I wanted to," Elon replied, stepping inside. "I don't believe in doing things halfway. If we're going to figure out how to get you back on your feet, we need to start the day right." Mark gestured for Elon to sit down. The two men spoke cautiously at first, but as the conversation deepened, Mark began to let his guard down. Elon asked questions, not just about their current struggles, but about who they were before life took this turn. Mark shared stories of his time working in manufacturing, how he used to dream of starting his own small business someday. Sarah spoke about her love of cooking and how she used to fantasize about owning a little cafe where she could serve homemade meals. Ben, now awake and munching on a pastry, chimed in about how much he missed his school friends. Elon listened intently, his mind working faster than he let on. "You've got a lot of potential," he said finally. "It's just about finding the right opportunities. I have a few ideas, but I'll need some time to put things in motion. In the meantime, I'd like to help you settle into a more stable situation." That afternoon, Elon arranged for the family to move into a temporary apartment he owned downtown. It was modest compared to his own sprawling properties, but luxurious to the family, who had grown used to sleeping on the streets. Mark and Sarah were overwhelmed with gratitude, but Elon assured them it was just a stepping stone. For the first few weeks, things seemed to be improving. Elon connected Mark with a training program that could lead to better job prospects and introduced Sarah to a local cafe owner who needed help in the kitchen. Ben was enrolled in a nearby school, where he quickly made friends. Yet, beneath the surface, tensions began to bubble. Mark, despite his best efforts, struggled with feelings of inadequacy. Every time he stepped into the training program, he was surrounded by younger, more experienced workers. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was falling behind, that he was letting his family down. Sarah, meanwhile, felt the weight of being the family's emotional anchor. While she appreciated Elon's help, she couldn't ignore the whispers from others in their building. Neighbors who speculated about why someone as famous and powerful as Elon Musk had taken an interest in their family. "Do you think he has an agenda?" one woman asked Sarah during a shared elevator ride. "People like him don't just do things for free." Sarah brushed off the comment, but it lingered in her mind. Why had Elon chosen them? Out of all the families in need, why had he stopped his car that night? The question gnawed at her, even as she tried to push it aside. Meanwhile, Elon faced his own challenges. Helping the family wasn't as simple as writing a check or giving them a place to stay. He had to navigate a delicate balance between offering support and respecting their independence. There were moments when he questioned if he was doing too much or not enough. His publicist, Maria, wasn't thrilled about the situation. "Elon, this could backfire," she warned during a tense meeting at his office. People might think you're trying to use this family for PR. And what happens if things don't work out? It's a risk. I'm not doing this for PR, Elon snapped. This isn't about image. It's about making a real difference. Still, the pressure weighed on him. Every decision he made felt scrutinized, every gesture analyzed. He didn't regret helping the family, but he couldn't ignore the complexity of their situation, or the growing tension between them and the world around them. One evening, as Elon visited the family to check on their progress, he noticed a shift in Mark's demeanor. The man who had been so grateful and optimistic just weeks ago now seemed guarded, almost resentful. When Elon brought up a new job opportunity, Mark bristled. "I appreciate what you've done for us," Mark said, his voice tight, "but I don't want to feel like a charity case. I need to figure this out on my own." Elon nodded, understanding the pride and frustration behind Mark's words. "I get it," he said calmly, "but remember, this isn't about charity. It's about giving you the tools to succeed. You don't have to do it alone." Sarah, too, seemed more distant, her usually warm smile replaced with something more reserved. Elon tried to reassure her, but the unspoken tension between them grew heavier with each passing day. Even Ben, who had once been so excited to see Elon, now seemed shy and uncertain around him. As the weeks went on, external pressures began to mount. News of Elon's involvement with the family leaked to the media, sparking a frenzy of speculation. Some praised him as a hero, while others accused him of ulterior motives. Reporters camped outside the family's building, shouting questions and snapping photos. Sarah and Mark felt exposed. Their private struggles turned into public fodder. One night, after yet another news story about their situation aired on TV, Mark and Sarah sat in their living room, exhausted and overwhelmed. "Maybe we made a mistake," Mark said quietly. "Maybe we shouldn't have accepted his help." Sarah shook her head. "He means well, Mark. But all of this, it's too much." Neither of them noticed Ben standing in the doorway, clutching his stuffed rabbit. The boy's eyes were wide with worry. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he could sense the unease in his parents' voices. He could feel the tension in the air. And though he didn't say it out loud, he feared what might happen next. It was late on a Thursday evening when everything changed. Elon had just finished another long day of meetings and was looking forward to a quiet evening, a moment of respite before another round of challenges awaited him the next day. He had promised Mark and Sarah he'd come by that night to check in. The tension between them had been palpable, but he was determined to keep his word and ensure they had the support they needed. As he drove through the city, a knot of unease twisted in his stomach. He had been so focused on their well-being, so absorbed in their lives, that he had failed to notice just how much pressure had been building on both sides. He pulled up to the building where the family now lived. The parking lot was empty, the streets quieter than usual. It wasn't a bad neighborhood, but it wasn't one where you'd expect to see a billionaire stopping by for a casual visit. He grabbed his bag, stepped out of the car, and walked up to the door. The building's usual hum of life was absent, and for a moment, he thought he had arrived too late. He rang the doorbell, waiting. The seconds stretched into what felt like minutes. No answer. He rang again, this time pressing his finger a little harder on the button, but still, nothing. Something felt off. He knocked on the door, his hand firm against the wood. The sound echoed unnervingly in the silence. He waited. Minutes passed. Still no answer. His instincts flared. Something was wrong. With a growing sense of urgency, Elon pulled his phone from his pocket, calling Mark. The line rang a few times before going to voicemail. He tried again, then again. The same result. Panic started to creep in, but he fought it back. He couldn't afford to lose control now. With his mind racing, he decided to go around back. The apartment had a small alleyway that led to the fire escape. He was about to scale it when he heard a noise. A muffled sound from inside the apartment. A struggle? A cry? Without a second thought, Elon sprinted toward the door at the back of the building. He pushed it open, only to find it unlocked. The door swung open with a faint creak, and he stepped into the dimly lit hallway. Everything seemed eerily still, as though the building itself was holding its breath. He walked slowly, cautiously, his footsteps echoing in the quiet. The door to their apartment was slightly ajar, and the faint sound of voices, low, angry voices, drifted out. Elon froze. His gut twisted. He pushed the door open further, revealing a scene that sent shockwaves through him. Mark was standing near the kitchen, his hands clenched into fists. Sarah was facing him, her expression torn between frustration and fear. Ben, wide-eyed and shaking, stood behind Sarah, clutching his stuffed rabbit as if it could shield him from the tension that thickened the air. Mark. Elon's voice broke the silence, heavy with concern. Mark turned at the sound of his voice, his face contorted with frustration. Elon, he spat, his voice tight with anger. What are you doing here? I came to check on you, Elon said, his eyes flicking from Mark to Sarah, searching for answers. What's going on? Mark took a step forward, his jaw clenched. You want to know what's going on? He sneered. You've been doing too much, Elon. Too much. You've been giving us everything, and I can't even look at you anymore without feeling like I'm just some project of yours. His voice was raw with emotion, but there was a bitter edge to it. Elon felt the sting of Mark's words, but he remained calm. I'm just trying to help, he said softly, though his heart ached. I thought you wanted a chance. I never asked for a damn chance from you. Mark shouted, his fists trembling at his sides. You think you can fix everything just by throwing money at it? You think you can come in and save us like some goddamn hero? Sarah flinched at Mark's outburst, her face pale as she stepped forward to try and calm her husband. Mark, please, she began, but her voice faltered when she saw Elon's face. Elon could see the crack in her composure, the pain that she'd been hiding. She wasn't angry like Mark, but she was scared. Of him, of their situation, of the pressure mounting from all sides. Her eyes, once full of hope, were clouded with doubt. Elon opened his mouth to speak, to say something, anything that would defuse the situation. But before he could, Mark's next words hit him like a slap. You can't fix this. You can't fix me. You can't fix us. I didn't ask for your help, Elon. We don't need it. Mark's anger was raw, unchecked, and the words seemed to hang in the air like a weight that neither of them could escape. Sarah, caught between her husband's wrath and her own fragile sense of pride, looked like she was on the verge of collapse. Ben, terrified by the shouting, clung to his mother, his small body trembling. For a moment, the world seemed to slow. Elon's pulse quickened, and for the first time since this whole thing had started, he felt a pang of doubt. Was he wrong? Was his interference doing more harm than good? The silence that followed Mark's outburst was thick with tension. The only sound was the rhythmic ticking of a clock on the wall, each second seeming to stretch longer than the last. Then, without warning, Mark swung toward the door, his shoulders heaving as if trying to release the storm of emotion swirling within him. I'm done. I don't want your help anymore. I don't want anything from you, he muttered, heading for the door. Elon, Sarah's voice broke through, softer than Mark's rage, but filled with the same anxiety. Please, don't take it personally. He's scared. Elon turned toward her, his heart aching as he saw the turmoil on her face. He wanted to comfort her, to tell her that it wasn't her fault, that none of this was her fault, but he couldn't find the words. He only nodded, his throat tight. Sarah, I'm just trying to help, he said, his voice strained. But I can't do it if you won't let me. Her eyes welled up, and for a fleeting moment, she looked so fragile, so lost, that Elon felt a sharp pang of sorrow. The realization hit him like a cold wave. He had been so focused on fixing their problems, on offering solutions, that he had failed to truly understand them. The weight of his well-meaning interference had become an impossible burden. As the door slammed behind Mark, Elon's resolve wavered. He wasn't sure what to do next, but one thing was clear. The family he had hoped to help was on the verge of falling apart, and the stakes had never been higher. The room was still, and for the first time, Elon wondered if his presence had only made things worse. In the days that followed, the silence between Elon and the family grew unbearable. After Mark's outburst, the space between them had widened in ways neither of them could have anticipated. Sarah, though still deeply appreciative of Elon's help, began to retreat further into herself, unsure of how to move forward. Ben, sensing the change in his parents, grew quieter, withdrawn in a way that unsettled them both. His once constant chatter had turned into reluctant whispers, as if he, too, were trying to navigate a new, uncomfortable reality. Elon, in his own way, was just as lost. His mind raced constantly, replaying the argument over and over, trying to find where things had gone wrong. He'd wanted to fix everything for them, to offer them a new start, but he had never accounted for the emotional complexities of their lives. His intentions, however pure, had led to a fracture in their relationships, and the guilt gnawed at him. That night, after Mark stormed out, Elon sat alone in his hotel room, staring out the window at the city lights below. The soft hum of the night was a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded. He had made countless business decisions in his life, but this was different. This wasn't about numbers or innovation. It was about people, their dignity, their lives, and in trying to help, he had inadvertently stripped away something that was far more important than any material gift. His phone buzzed on the table, the screen lighting up with a message from Maria, his publicist. "You need to make a statement. The media is picking up on the argument. People are starting to question your motives." Elon exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. The media had been relentless ever since the story of his involvement with the family broke. At first, the public had hailed him as a philanthropist, a hero. But now, with the fallout of the argument and the rumors swirling, the narrative was shifting. Was he just another billionaire trying to use his wealth to play God? Was this all part of some elaborate publicity stunt? He set the phone down, lost in thought. He didn't want to be defined by what the media said. He didn't want to be the subject of a headline or a social media trend. But more than that, he didn't want to lose the family he had genuinely tried to help. Meanwhile, back at the apartment, Sarah and Mark were navigating their own turmoil. After Mark left, he didn't return that night. Sarah tried to keep things together for Ben, but the weight of their fractured family hung heavily over her. She spent the evening pacing the apartment, her mind racing with the events that had unfolded. In the early hours of the morning, she finally got a text from Mark. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to blow up like that. I'm just scared. I don't know how to handle all of this." Sarah stared at the message, her heart aching. She knew Mark had always struggled with pride, with a sense of not being enough, but she also knew he loved her and Ben deeply. She could see how the pressure of their new life, of living under a microscope, of trying to accept help they hadn't asked for, had become too much for him to handle. She wiped away a tear and typed back, "We need to talk. We need to fix this. Together." When Mark returned the next afternoon, the tension between them was palpable, but there was a quiet understanding in the way they looked at each other. Mark, his face weary and regretful, sat down beside Sarah on the couch. "I messed up," he admitted, his voice hoarse. "I let everything get to me. The pressure, the fear of not being able to do it myself, and then all the attention from the media. I couldn't take it." Sarah reached out and took his hand, her grip firm. "I understand, but we can't keep pushing people away, Mark. Not when we need each other more than ever." Together, they decided to reach out to Elon, though neither of them felt entirely ready. They both knew they needed to face the reality of their situation. The weight of Elon's help, though generous, had created a rift that had to be mended. Mark, in particular, still felt a sense of shame, but Sarah reminded him that they couldn't move forward without acknowledging the mistakes they'd made, both in their reaction to Elon and in their relationship with each other. Meanwhile, Elon had also been wrestling with his own demons. The media backlash was growing louder. Stories began to surface about his so-called social experiments, suggesting that his generosity was less about altruism and more about self-interest. The backlash was harsh, but Elon's resolve to make things right never wavered. Despite the mounting pressure, he knew that he had to address the situation not just publicly, but personally as well. When Sarah and Mark finally reached out, Elon immediately agreed to meet with them. They arranged to meet at the apartment that had become both a refuge and a source of tension. When Elon arrived, there was a noticeable shift in the atmosphere. The tension was still there, but there was a quiet understanding that this meeting was necessary, even if it was uncomfortable. "I'm sorry," Mark said first, his voice low. "I acted like an idiot. I let my pride get in the way, and I shouldn't have." Elon nodded, the weight of the situation hanging heavily between them. "I understand. I should have been more careful, too. I didn't see how much pressure I was putting on you. I thought I was helping, but I didn't realize what you were going through." The apology didn't erase the hurt, but it was a start. Elon, Mark, and Sarah spent hours talking, unpacking the emotions and misunderstandings that had built up between them. They spoke about their fears, their pride, and the complicated reality of asking for and accepting help. Through their conversation, the underlying truth became clear. The world had changed around them, but the basic human need for connection and understanding had not. Elon realized that true support wasn't about rescuing people from their struggles. It was about walking alongside them, giving them space to grow, and offering a hand when it was truly needed. In the weeks that followed, the family began to rebuild, not just their external lives, but their relationship with each other. They moved into a new home that Elon had helped secure for them, but it was clear that the journey was far from over. Mark found steady work through the training program Elon had arranged, while Sarah continued working at the cafe. Ben flourished in his new school, though the transition had been harder than anyone had anticipated. Publicly, the media's interest in the family began to die down, but the questions lingered. Had Elon done enough to truly change their lives, or had his involvement only complicated their struggles? People would continue to debate that. But for Elon, the lesson was clear. Helping someone meant acknowledging their humanity, not just offering solutions. And for Sarah and Mark, the lesson was equally powerful. Sometimes, the greatest strength lay in accepting help, in allowing others to show up for you when the weight of the world felt too much to carry alone. In the end, there was no quick fix. There was no single moment where everything fell perfectly into place. But they had learned something important, something that couldn't be fixed with money or gestures, but with time, honesty, and the willingness to face their own fears together. And perhaps, in some way, that was the most lasting change of all. The months that followed the tense meeting between Elon, Mark, and Sarah were filled with slow but steady progress. The fractures in their relationship began to heal, though not without bumps along the way. Mark found a steady job through the connections Elon had helped him secure, but it wasn't without its challenges. He still wrestled with his pride, sometimes clashing with his new employer, but he worked hard to prove himself. Sarah, ever the support, was there beside him, offering encouragement and strength when he needed it most. She had never been the type to rely on anyone, but she learned that it was okay to lean on others, that accepting help didn't make her weak, it made her stronger. Ben, their young son, had adapted to his new school, though the transition had been a struggle. It wasn't easy for a child to make sense of the changes in his world, and for a while, his small shoulders carried more weight than they should have. But over time, with the stability of their new home and the care of his parents, he found his voice again. He made friends, grew more confident, and started to let go of the fear that had clung to him during those chaotic first months. His laughter returned, and with it, the lightness that had been absent for so long. As for Elon, the experience had changed him. It had shaken him in ways he hadn't anticipated. For all his achievements, all his technological advancements, this story wasn't about innovation or pushing boundaries. It was about people, relationships, and the limitations of his wealth. He had set out to fix someone's life, but in the end, he had learned that fixing wasn't the solution. Sometimes, all you could do was provide a foundation, a platform for someone to stand on, and then let them build their own way. His involvement in the family's life wasn't the salvation he had imagined, but it was a stepping stone, a lesson in humility and understanding. The media, as expected, continued to spin their own version of the story. Some hailed him as a hero, others as a misguided philanthropist with too much power and not enough empathy. But the truth, Elon realized, was far more complex than any headline could capture. There was no simple narrative here. There was no clear-cut resolution. People would always question his motives, but in the end, it didn't matter. What mattered was that he had tried. And what mattered even more was the transformation he had undergone, not just in his relationships with others, but in his own understanding of what it meant to truly help. Mark and Sarah, too, had been forever altered. Their relationship with Elon had taught them more than they could have anticipated. At first, they had been resentful of the wealth that seemed to weigh so heavily on their lives. But as they grew more comfortable with the help, they realized it wasn't the money that mattered. It was the intention behind it. They learned that they didn't have to carry their burdens alone. They didn't have to fight every battle in isolation. And though they would always struggle with their own sense of pride, they learned to balance it with the humility needed to accept support when it was offered. In the end, their lives were forever changed, not because they had a new house or a better financial situation, but because they had learned to face their vulnerabilities and open themselves to the possibility of growth. They had learned that the true value of their story was not in what Elon Musk had given them, but in what they had given each other. Their family was stronger now, not because of the material wealth that had entered their lives, but because they had grown closer, more understanding, and more resilient. The broader societal implications of this story were difficult to ignore. It brought into sharp focus the complexities of wealth, power, and privilege. Elon's intervention, for all its good intentions, had highlighted the challenges of philanthropy in a world that often viewed charity with suspicion. The story raised questions about the limits of what wealth could do for people, and whether it was even possible to fix someone's life with money. It also revealed the delicate balance between offering help and respecting a person's autonomy, between providing opportunity and maintaining the dignity of those you aim to assist. And at the heart of it all was a deeper reflection on human nature. People, no matter their circumstances, carried their own histories, their own traumas, and their own pride. No amount of money, no matter how well-meaning the gesture, could erase the complexities of a life shaped by struggle and experience. True change, the kind that lasts, comes not from external interventions but from within, from the decision to change, to grow, and to learn. As the video of Elon's involvement with the family came to a close, viewers were left with something to ponder. Was Elon Musk simply a man with too much power, trying to fix the world in his image? Or was he a person who, like all of us, was trying to do the best he could in an imperfect world? The answer, of course, was not simple. But perhaps that was the point, to show that in a world of complex problems, simple solutions rarely work. As the screen faded to black, the narrator's voice broke the silence. What do you think? Can one person truly change another's life? Or is the answer more complicated than we realize? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. The call to action was a gentle reminder that the story wasn't over, that the conversation was just beginning. And as the credits rolled, it left viewers with a lingering sense of introspection about the world, about themselves, and about the relationships that shape our lives.